This week we saw the government's hate crime bill pass, and that is why we've seen this breakup in the coalition. So it does not come without controversy. But let's deal with the laws, the new laws we have as they are at the moment. Joining me live now, I'm very happy to say, the former Home Affairs Secretary, Mike Pezzullo. Mike, so great to talk to you this morning. I wanted to talk about these hate crime laws. Not the politics, let's go well away from that. Let's talk about the mechanics of it. What does it actually mean from here on in? How long do they take? Does the bureaucracy take to catch up? And what are the likely outcomes of this? Because, of course, they're not retrospective, or are they?
Good morning, Laura. In some cases, statements made prior to the royal assent being given can be considered, but typically I think to render it safe, statements going forward are going to be typically what prosecutors will rely upon. Two key provisions, Laura, in a mechanical sense. There's the aggravated offence, which involves greater jail time for preachers and other spiritual leaders who breach existing provisions, so not new provisions, of the criminal code that go to urging or promoting violence. AFP Commissioner Barrett has spoken publicly about having a squad of investigators that she calls, I think, hate disruptors. So they will be now, if you like, empowered to go after these hate preachers with the potential to gain longer periods of conviction through the courts if the DPP, of course, agrees to accept the brief and the brief is put to the court. So that's one track, the aggravated offence track. And in the main track, which has been the subject of a lot of this political turbulence that you've just been talking about, is the new mechanism which sits below listing a terror group. Now there's going to be an ability to list what's called a prohibited hate group. And in very simple terms, a prohibited hate group has to engage in what's called hate crime. The bar has been set very high because the Director General of ASIO has to provide an assessment to the Home Affairs Minister before the Home Affairs Minister can turn their mind to such a listing. And the Director General of Security has to be satisfied that the statements, the speeches, the utterances that these groups are projecting could increase the risk of what's called communal violence or politically motivated violence. So it's quite a high bar. In fact, it's so high, the safeguards that have been put around this are so high that I'm not going to say this in a political sense, I'm just looking at the legislation. I don't think that there's any longer a even residual free speech risk. In fact, I think, Laura, the risk actually is potentially the other way. I could, and I don't want to give these hate groups advice, but I could see how you could shapeshift if you're a Nazi group or one of the more extreme Islamic groups, or Islamist groups, I should say. I could see how you could shapeshift and just come in below the level of prohibited hate group listing thresholds and continue to exist.
Right. So, I mean, it seems quite subjective if it's up to ASIO and up to Mike Burgess to give recommendations to the Home Affairs Minister, I would assume, in prescribing such a hate group. So is this almost like a playbook for some of these more radical clerics and hate groups where can they, still hide behind religious texts? And what is the threshold? Without helping them with their playbook this morning, can you try and answer that for us?
Well, first of all, ASIO, in fact, can't operate subjectively. They operate under the ASIO Act, and there's very well-known provisions in the ASIO Act that go to politically motivated violence when you, for instance, in this case, would incite someone to assassinate a person. That's politically motivated violence. Or to blow up, say, a government building. That's politically motivated violence. Communal violence, again, described in law, these provisions in the ASIO Act have been there since 1949. They're very old provisions, is well understood as well. In terms of the playbook element, and again, we don't want to give away, it's like giving away how to build an atomic weapon. We don't want to do that. But essentially, as long as you disavow violence, so the Nazi groups, for instance, I'll focus on the NSN. If they continue the path they are on of saying, look, we don't support violence, they've stripped a lot of their websites and other fora of references to Hitler. The Hitler reference is problematic because everyone knows it's a well-grounded fact that Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust, which saw the evil murder of so many Jewish and other people, but principally Jewish people. So that's a reference to violence. As long as they strip all of that away, I can see a white power or a white supremacy or a white Australia party forming or a group forming, which as long as they stay below that advocacy of violence, they will be, in our free democracy, allowed to establish themselves without falling foul of the prohibited hate group. Now, had the vilification measure, which was about individualised speech, so that you recall, Laura, there was a vilification scheme that wasn't a group thing, it was an individual thing. Had that stayed in its original form, then white supremacy, calling for white power, calling for the deportation of certain ethnic groups might well have fallen foul of those provisions. Wow. Because if the targeted person felt offended, harassed or otherwise, without even necessarily fearing violence, then that might have triggered. So I think there was a real discussion to be had last week. It was obviously very unedifying, it was very messy. But the point I made to the Parliamentary Committee when I met, I think in that vilification speech area, which I think we should come back to. I know the Prime Minister's ruled that out, but I think if Justice Bell thinks that it's worth looking at, I think actually there is a case for dehumanising speech, vilifying speech that would potentially incentivise someone else to commit an act of violence. And let's face it, Laura, the people who have been most dehumanised in discourse at the moment are Jewish people. I agree with the Jewish peak groups that there should be a revisiting of the vilification element in due course, in a measured way, do it carefully, don't rush it.
Well, perhaps after the Royal Commission, we'll see what the Royal Commission does actually recommend. I mean, Anthony Albanese doesn't want to touch it for now. He's made that clear. But perhaps the next inflection point is after we do get those recommendations from the Royal Commission. Mike, I wanted to ask you as well about these hate speech laws as we have them at the moment. There was a lot of questioning over whether criticism of Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu policies in Gaza could somehow be caught in these new provisions. What's your read of that?
Look, very hard to see how they could. If you are making, as is your right in a democracy, a criticism of the state of Israel, which does not, if you like, attach itself to the racial or ethnic or national characteristics of Jewish people. In other words, you're not raising, even implicitly, some kind of sinister description of Jewish people. You're just simply saying, as a matter of policy, in the same way that we can talk about Ukraine, for instance, as a matter of policy, I don't agree with the level of force that's been used by the State of Israel against the population of Gaza. I can't see how that would fall foul at all.
OK. I want to talk about a few other things on the world stage at the moment. There's plenty going on. We're not even in February yet. Usually it's pretty quiet until we get to Australia Day. Not this year, Mike Pezzullo. 2026 is going to be a hell of a year. There's always so much to talk to you with you about, but before I let you go, I wanted to talk to you about Mark Carney. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. He's made some pointed remarks at Davos. Let's take a look.
The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us.
So, what do you think about his intervention there?
Look, it was a remarkable speech. It was very well constructed. He's powerfully spoken. And I agree with him on his diagnosis. It's time that we stop living in the lie, to use his phrase, that we take the sign out of the shop window to say that there's a orderly system of international relations, the rules-based order. I agree with him. We should call that out and we should call it for the lie that it's become. I don't agree at all, actually, with his prognosis. By saying that the big powers will do what they will, they'll take what they want, the rest of us have to somehow band together. Well, that's like saying all red-headed people should band together in world politics because we'll be stronger as red-headed people. What are the common interests that middle powers have, say Canada, Australia, Mexico, Turkey, for instance, that would bind us together, that would, if you like, deliver on our national interest better than being aligned, because we're all going to fall into someone's orbit. Let's just face it. You and I have spoken for over a year now about the fact that global power is realigning itself. We can choose the Chinese orbit. You and I have spoken about that many times. I think there's a lot of downsides to that. Or we can choose our traditional alliance partner, the United States. And there's going to be some rub points in that, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But this idea that middle powers can sort of take a step back from these big bullies that are striding over the world like, titans clashing while we, go into the corner of the schoolyard where the quiet kids play and just band together. Well, like I said, we might as well just say in international relations, all red-headed people should just band together because we've got a common interest in being red-headed. It's just the solution is wrong for the problem that he's correctly identified.
Yeah, no point in joining the chess club when the real fight is in the boxing ring. Absolutely, Mike. Never enough time.
I like chess, Laura.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd too. Don't worry about that, Mike. We'll see you soon.